Normally, I like to start the show here with some sort of snappy opening line, right? Something where it's going to encapsulate what we're going to talk about on the show today. And the only thing I could think of was bleak. Oh, this is bleak. Maybe. That's at least how it feels to start the show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Sean Fitz, Ryan Snyder, our recruiting reporters, are here to discuss Penn State's two-person class in the class of 2026, something that we've talked about that they predicted was going to happen, given the trajectory of the coaching search over the final month of the season. But for it to then happen, it does hit different. So we're going to get into just that, but genuinely, when there are two players to discuss on a recruiting show, Ryan, I don't necessarily know how to lead this conversation. So, I'm just going to toss this out, and then we'll kind of bat the ball around and see what happens. We'll play catch here on air and see how, if the ball hits the turf. So, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Doing well. Hey, they still had more 4 stars than Pitt and Rutgers, right? But all right, never mind.
Ryan's actually done a 30-minute stand-up set to start the show, so Ryan, it's all yours.
Might be more entertaining than what we'll talk about probably. But listen, I just posted a pretty lengthy analysis, thoughts on how this all played out. I know you listen to any podcast, YouTube show yesterday, whatever it may have been, the easy answer is that, well, they don't have a coach. But Florida, I know Florida and LSU got their coaches at the very end, but neither of those schools, they're different. I know, Sean, they're different situations, but they didn't have nearly the fallout. And, anybody who subscribes, I'd say go check out that story, because I just spent, weeks trying to ask every source I could, from parents to high school coaches to, anybody, and just been kind of taking notes and trying to put the full story together. And it's about more than just not having a coach. Obviously, that's a big part of it. I'm not trying to downplay that, but lack of communication, finances, James Franklin being 400 miles within State College and closer to a lot of other recruits as well, certainly played a part in it. So go check that out. We'll discuss it a little bit later in the show as well. But there's a lot that went into that. At the same time, go out and buy your Peyton Falzone and Jackson Ford jerseys when you can, because I know they've become a rallying cry for this fan base, and good for them for seeing and believing in the future of it, because right now it's pretty bleak everywhere else, it seems like.
It's Jackson Ford made his maybe Penn State legacy yesterday by being the one guy that decided to commit to the program. Brian, I'll just come back to you. I know you spoke to him multiple times down the stretch here. So what was the general feeling of him signing, his confidence in his decision, and then why stay with Penn State? Why be the one guy in this class that went from his commitment through signing day without decommitting? And we'll get to Peyton Falzone and that story in a minute, but he's the one guy that stayed committed the entire time during his process.
Yeah, I'll start off the bat. Deion Barnes is still here, and that's a big part of it. What happens long-term with Deion, I think, could still have an impact on Jackson. I'm going to be very honest with that. Falzone obviously decommitted when he did, and he did have other opportunities. I know James was pushing for him down the stretch too, and I think he looked at this situation and saw there could be quite a few outgoing quarterbacks, different things like that, and I think that was attracted to him. And I believe those guys have a faith, or hopeful at least, that some of the current staff are still here. And look, we're so far into this coaching search now that I don't know how you don't try to retain some of these coaches who are still here, or at least have strong ties to Penn State, because, obviously there's so many names out there. I don't really want to speculate on who it would be, but we've gotten to the point now where if it is anybody who's not one of those marquee head coaches who have firm staffs and all that, where, if it is I know it's Brian Dable, whatever it may be, somebody who's kind of outside of the general thought of what we thought we'd see.
From
they're
outside college football coaching, right?
Right?
From outside of the college football sphere, or one of those guys.
Right.
But we've also talked about it before, that they're not beholden to when Franklin came to Penn State, he had 9 assistants or 8 assistants, I guess it was at that point, and that's not the case anymore. You can have not unlimited, theoretically unlimited staff, I guess. So you're talking about you bring so when Franklin came from Vanderbilt, he had Sean Spencer as his D-line coach, so he gave Larry Johnson a token offer, basically, whatever. Now you can have you can bring your own D-line coach, and you can keep Deion Barnes as a he coaches the ends, he coaches the tackles, whatever it may be.
Right.
So opening up this staff also opens up the possibility of keeping a guy like Dion, guy like Dan Connor, Terry obviously is going to be talked about very much so if he doesn't get the head job. So like there's more opportunity for those guys if they are comfortable. And that's usually for guys lower on the pecking order, lower on the salary structure, I think a lot of them have opportunities to go to Blacksburg, but at the same time, like that's not always like the next job for you. That's not always the best opportunity for you for whatever reason. Could be family, roots, all that kind of stuff. So I think that you look for Penn State guys and then you branch out from there, but there's more of an opportunity now than there used to be to stay. Used to be just clean house and you're done. So,
yeah. So time will tell. Time will tell. But I think that's a big part of it. And, also with Jackson too, I mean, he liked the idea of just Penn State and the university as a whole and just the foundation that's been here for a long time, right? It fit him well. He went on a lot of visits, that he went to Kentucky, to Stanford, to Wisconsin, to all types of different schools, Ohio State, Michigan, obviously those were mainly back in the summer, but he just felt like what was established here at Penn State. And I know a lot of that was under Franklin, but a lot of what Franklin did has been Penn State for much longer than that. Right. So that, plus they've always developed defensive linemen. He still feels confident that'll be the case. That's why he felt confident signing. So,
and
I see him go.
And he went to Tech too. Like he visited Virginia Tech too, which is really eye opening because everybody that's gone down there is pretty much committed there. So, except Matt Sieg flipped to West Virginia yesterday, so that's interesting. But
after not visiting the school for 2 years, by the way.
Yeah,
he did not take an official visit there this past weekend, so that was eye opening to me a little bit.
Hey, West Virginia did exactly what they should do in that they pushed their chips in on guys like Kevin Brown, who, we've talked before, and Sieg's probably in the same boat, taking some sort of hometown discount. Virginia Tech knew what he was getting at Penn State. West Virginia found out what he was getting at Penn State and decided to multiply it. So I think that going back, that's more of a Brown situation. I haven't talked to the Sieg family. I know you're closer with them, but and it makes sense for a guy like Sieg, who's from Fort Cherry are they still Class A or are they Double A now, Ryan?
Class A. Yeah.
They're still Class A program. Western PA, West Virginia fits a lot there.
They signed 45 kids.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Get used to that because Rich Rodriguez is going into his second year, so it's going to happen. I mean, 45 is a lot. Like get used to it. Might be a bit of an overdramatic pause there, but Penn State's going to have to sign a lot of guys at some point because they're going to, in some way, make up for the 2026 class. Now, you can do that, and I'm not saying this is the right way to go about it all, but you can do that via portal. You can do that via portal adding young guys. Like that, we always talk about the portal as quick fixes and things like that, but Penn State's been pretty good about adding Davian Collins and Johnny Dixon and guys who were younger in their scheme or younger in their career and fitting them into their scheme, and that's going to be what they have to do. So the next guy that comes in is going to have to lean on those relationships that they've had from recruiting. And that's why you still recruit. Like that, we talk about how different recruiting is now because it's, you get up to the end and then all of a sudden it's negotiating instead of recruiting, but those relationships can come back and help you in the long run. So you can do that. You can sign a huge 2027 class. You can do that. Again, it's not the ideal way to go about it, but there are ways to backfill this entire roster. It doesn't have to be in January 2026.
So I guess that takes us in a bit of a different direction because then we've opened Pandora's box of how this all works out. Because the next coach has to have those recruiting ties. They have to have the deep understanding of the recruiting atmosphere, have prior relationships. Like we'll get into that a little bit later.
He can have a staff that has those. Like if say Dayball is an option here. He's a pro coach. He spent 1 year at Alabama, so no relationships whatsoever.
Right.
That's why Terry's important. That's why Dion's important. These guys that he could retain or he could bring in from other college staffs. Like those guys would be doing the legwork. And by the way, a lot of the legwork is already done by recruiting staffs. I know Kenny Sanders, Alan Zamitis, so those guys that have been around for a long time do most of the contact and most of the talking. And when you talk to parents, sometimes those are the first, and a lot of times, really, Ryan, right? Those are the first names out of their mouth are the ones that they actually communicate with on a daily basis.
It was like 70% the recruiting staff here last year or two. I mean, as far as like daily conversations, obviously Deion Barnes had a big impact with talking to Jackson Ford or, defensive linemen in general. I'm not trying to downplay that, but Penn State had grown their recruiting staff to a point that's what James wanted. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of other big schools too.
So let me ask you a question. Yeah, because that's a great insight, because what we have become accustomed to, I think, is James Franklin as the face of Penn State recruiting and the guy who is out there in front. Like, everything's tied to him, but the recruiting staff in the background and the coaches in the background doing the work. So I guess what's the point of the head coach in this context then for the next head coach? Like, does it have to be that way? Like, again, let's just because he's a guy that is so alien to the recruiting conversation, let's just plunk Brian Daboll in here and say he's the next head coach. Like, does recruiting just happen around him? Like, how much does he have to integrate quickly into this to make these decisions? And how much of a say does a coach like that in that situation have over the recruiting process? I guess he has probably final say, but like, it just feels like if you're trying to keep Penn State's current staff, which is kind of where it seems like you guys are leaning in terms of what the best case scenario for a situation might be to fix all of this, then does it matter who the coach is, like, from the recruiting standpoint? Okay. All right. So
it still matters.
Just walk me through like the important, like the impacts. What's the impact of a good head coach and what's the impact of a bad head coach from specifically from a recruiting standpoint?
Bill Belichick, bad. Anybody who's charismatic and can develop relationships and well spoken, all those kind of things, that all still matters. I'm not trying to make it out as if the 10 assistant coaches and James weren't doing a lot of recruiting. They're still doing a lot of recruiting.
Sure.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is 5-6 years ago, they were doing 60-70% of the recruiting, and it hurt with prep and things like that. That was the model of college football. Yeah. Kind of before the pandemic, things like that, where what we saw at a lot of other schools, especially started to shift, I would say, after COVID, all those kind of things, growing recruiting staffs. Every 5-10% that you can take off your plate and you can focus on your current team helps. Okay. It all matters in the end, as far as winning results, winning off the field, all those kind of things. And that's why you want to build a big recruiting staff. And I expect Penn State will still have something of that sort. So they were up to 14 at the time of going into the season. Now, obviously, a lot of them have already joined James, and there's a handful who's still here who are really important. And I think they trying to keep some of them would be smart on Kraft's side and whoever the next coach is. But I guess main thing I'm just trying to come back to is, even if it's a 10% less on James's plate or 20% less on whoever the next coach will be, it helps them again with current team. Because the biggest complaint we had for a long time was that coaches were putting too much time towards recruiting and not enough time towards their team. That was a consistent theme that, we didn't just hear from Penn State, but everybody was talking about. That was a big thing at AFCA conferences and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just trying to balance it the best you can. But you absolutely need a head coach who can come in here and be charismatic. And even if that person doesn't have those relationships off the jump, that's where having Kenny Sanders, AZ, some of the people that are still here help bridge that gap.
Bridge that gap and help it make the introductions and kind of ingrain the next coach. Okay. So that I guess paint some lines around the picture to where, like, when we have these conversations, sometimes it feels like what's in bounds, what's out of bounds in the conversation, and how some of these coaches that have been named in the conversation feel like, well, I don't know how that could fit with the recruiting angle to all of this.
And listen, if it had been Kalani Sitake or Bob Chesney, I mean, they were absolutely going to have a separate GM model. And this is a model that we've talked about a decent amount. More schools are trying to do it. It's not easy to do when you're trying to hire an elite coach, right? For example, Kalen DeBoer in Penn State, like that was talked about a good bit. If Kalen DeBoer actually would have came to Penn State, he's bringing Courtney Morgan. Courtney Morgan's been his guy forever. Just like when James went to Va Tech, Andy Frank was there the next day as his GM. Like, those guys are attached, and those coaches who have years of experience and who are coveted to whatever degree you want to put it, they have the pool to keep that going. That's what Kraft wants to get away from. The problem I have now is I felt pretty confident that Kraft's trying to hire an NFL personnel. I don't know exactly who it is, but he's trying to go that route, right? Somebody who's worked as assistant GMs in that kind of route and bring that person in to help facilitate scouting and financials and all those kind of things. The thing now, I don't even know where to go is because we don't know who that coach is going to be or even kind of who they're targeting even at this point. I can't fully say that's going to be the model because, if somehow he does strike up gold and get somebody who's has some experience and is coveted to some degree, that person may want to bring in the next Andy Frank. So it's just it's hard to really kind of filter this out at the moment.
So Fitz, what's the benefit of that model? Going away from what we've seen and going into what Ryan just described, like how is that beneficial to the coach? Like, does it make them just a coach? Is there a power play dynamic? Is there a power dynamic of the politics of coaching, or is it truly just to separate the two so coaches coach and GMs handle talent like they do in the NFL?
Yeah, I think there is a split with the GM handling contracts, handling how deals would get done, roster management, player number allocations and things of that nature. And then the coach can just coach, but also there's an overlap between the coach has to have that connection with the player. Like, it's not a situation where, in the NFL, you're golfing a couple months a year while the GM and the front office make the acquisitions to put together the roster. And then they hand you the roster and say, here, coach. It's not as simple as that, but in college, you're going to have to mesh the two. Even the most highly regarded GMs, which I think we've gone from not talking about GMs to maybe overvaluing them a little bit.
Fair.
I like, and they're still extremely important. Absolutely. But like, it's still on sort of this rocker where the coach is going to have the power, because all the coaches that are coaching right now are, I don't want to call them old school, but they live the
They're
model.
from the traditional model. Yeah.
They want the college. They want to be on top. Absolutely. And there's some programs that are just kind of like, and they're not all small programs, because Ryan, you mentioned Oklahoma has done Jim Nagy, thank you, has done some things. And Stanford with Andrew Luck is a different model. And Ron Rivera is hiring Tosh Lapoy at Cal. There's these different models where, it's a guy answering to a guy, but at the same time, the coach has to have the say, because the coach knows what scheme he's going to run. The coach knows what plays he's going to call. Like that, you still have to find fit there. So it's not, obviously, as a Redskins, Commanders, whatever football team fan, it's not going out and finding like all these Albert Hainsworth who doesn't fit at all. It's just like, because he's the best player available. It's like there still has to be collaboration and fit and things like that. Now, the problem, and using problem, maybe it might be overarching here with having a guy like they had with James and Andy, is that Andy was under James the entire time. Like, he was attached at the hip in the sense that he was working and playing out James's stuff, right? I mean, it's Emperor Darth Vader stuff. Like, and that's, I hope Andy hears that. I'm going to a phone call with that. But it's like, here, do my bidding, which is fine, and that can work. It's just it has to be able to work with the back end of it, with the contracts, with the negotiations, with roster management, and all that stuff. Especially when you're going down to 105, where the margin of error gets slimmer. It's not a 53-man roster like the NFL, but it's also, you're not going to be able to go out and sign somebody in the middle of the season. Like, there's got to be play. There's got to be things at play, because in college football, it's a cycle, right? You get these guys for 3, 4, 5 years, where in the NFL, like, there's always going to be a talent pool that you can pull from. Like, it's just going to be step. So the new guy, it's going to have to be a collaboration. It's going to have to be a combination of that. And from what Ryan was saying and reporting, that like the separate model was definitely on the table. Like, there's no right.
And I still think it is
yet. What's that?
I still think it's more likely than not.
Absolutely. But there's no right way to go about it right now, because there's not enough evidence to point to this guy. The guy that can win the national championship this year could be a situation that was like James and Andy. It was like my guy forever as the GM. So like, there's no way to go, because I mean, Ohio State, that he's been there forever. It's like, it's been a situation like that. Now he's one of the better player personnel guys. Like, and that's what we see with guys like Andy Frank and others, is the elevation of the player personnel guys to GM is a big step, but also kind of the same thing, right, Ryan?
I just think the financial aspect of it all is kind of how ADs are looking at it a little bit differently now. I could go, we could do a whole show on this, because I've spent a lot of time talking to people about it. I think there's a lot of reasons why ADs like this. And maybe the most important thing is it takes power away from the head coach, and it makes the AD more important.
To me, that to me is what I'm reading. It's kind of reading the room of, if you want the GM model, you want to separate the ultimate power source in college football, which is the head coach. Like,
head coach.
You have the hiring and firing power, and you have the personnel power. You have all that power, and now you have NIL contract power as the guy who has essentially the athletic director is a secondary player in this conversation who is really in charge of other sports, but like the head football coach has the central, like he's got the stick. And so if you can take that from him, it becomes more advantageous to you. And I don't know if that's Pat Kraft's feeling on it specifically, but that is very obviously a part of the decision making, because you can fire a coach or you can fire a GM and not upset and turn over the entire program, as we saw happen just now. And I think there's an element there as well of not even talking about the power thing, but also, and I'm just going to redirect this a little bit, Ryan. I know you got something you wanted to chip in here, but if you were to do this, do coaching salaries go down because it de-emphasizes the coach in half, essentially?
It may, but Chad Bowden's getting $2 million as a GM at USC, so I don't, you're still putting that money.
Your head coach gets $8. Fair point.
Frank, you had a story about that last night, didn't you?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that later. We're gonna get to the end of the show.
But Chad Bowden is a good example, though. Like Chad Bowden stealing him away from Notre Dame, that's a separate situation there. And again, obviously, he works very closely with Lincoln Riley. But, oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw, where did USC's class finish? It's number 1 in the country. Now, there's reasons for that. USC was also one of the first schools to kind of figure out, hey, we backload a bunch of money this year and pay our roster before this rev share starts, that we can take a lot of that money then and put it towards recruiting. And that's kind of what we saw. And it's a big reason why they finished number 1 in the country this year. Other schools, a lot of schools did that. I'm sure Penn State did to some degree, but they were one of the first, I felt like, to really kind of see that opportunity, and then everybody else kind of caught on as the class went forward. But this is the model that I think Penn State wants to go. Obviously, Florida just did it. Hiring was it Dave Caldwell? I think he was part of the Eagles organization. Originally was in Jacksonville as their actual GM, I think, at one point. But I think that's where Kraft wants to go. Whether that's how it all works or not, we'll see. The belief is that having a general manager in place helps alleviate what we just saw if there is a coaching firing, because there is some stability there as far as recruiting and all that. There's a belief that it would help a lot with people who are just more experienced dicing out money to certain pieces of the roster and what's most important. I had a talk with somebody the other day. I don't even know if I should bring it up, but screw it. Let's go. I had a talk with somebody the other day who brought up Katron and Nick and the amount of money that went to those two this year. And obviously, I know Penn State fans don't even want to think about not having both of those on the team going into the season. But the person just kind of said, is there any NFL team that would allocate money to 2 all-pro running backs? I thought it was an interesting point, right? And again, not at all.
I mean, we brought that up here on the show. It is revealing to hear somebody internally say that, but we've brought up here when you're talking about.
But
I'm sorry. Sorry, I inferred that. That's my bad. It was an interesting point. I think that's why I like this NFL mindset is intriguing to ADs right now, of just the perspective of where truly is the best place to put this money, right? And again, take me back to August. I thought I would have kind of been like, what do you mean you don't want Katron and Nick? But fast forward to now, and it's like, well, they took some of that money and maybe put it towards a defensive tackle or two in the portal. Yep.
May have helped a little bit this season. So, I think that's just kind of the mindset of it. And I just thought that was an interesting point of view. And
if you're going to allocate that, run the ball 70% of the time. But anyway,
well,
let's move on.
I have talked to some internal people about that, but okay, go
on. Well, the thing we should get to now, actually, is that we need to talk about the future of Penn State football, the hiring of the next coach, and all that stuff. But really, the thing we've been talking about this entire time is money. And so if you want to change the trajectory of Penn State football future, donate to the program. If you want to do that, make a lot of money. If you want to make a lot of money, maybe you should talk to Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise. If you want to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, and the American dream is to have a lot of money and determine your own future. Money is the conversation point. It is the starting point for all of these discussions because it is opportunity. It's all the things. And if you have spent your life building experience of making other people money and you want to start making that money for yourself, consider investing in a franchise. And Andy has done that multiple times. He's got almost a decade of experience doing that, of buying and selling franchises. So he can help you through the entire process. And this is the thing. That advice, that help that can put you in the right situation, can't guarantee you're going to succeed, but can help you increase your odds as high as they possibly can go. He's the guy that can help you with it, and his services are 100% free to you. So give him a call at 404-973-9901. That's 404-973-9901, or Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. He knows all about business. He knows all about franchises. What are the trends? What the consumer wants? What the American public, what they're spending their money on. And he can give you all that information. I am one of the consumers. So that's all I know is like what I'm spending money on, but not like what he knows. So give him a call once again, or get on his schedule to see about the next stage in your future. I do kind of want to, at some point, talk a little bit more about the actual players in the class, talk about what Jackson Ford brings to the table, what Peyton Falzone brings to the table. We may get to that because I think that this has been a very enlightening conversation. So let's just start with Peyton Falzone, because I think he is a perfect product of the system this year, Fitz. Guy who committed to Penn State, then decommitted, went to Auburn. Auburn lost its coach. Penn State lost its coach. And now he's back with the Nittany Lions. So from an opportunity standpoint, I guess, what does Peyton Falzone bring to Penn State? What does he represent in this two-person class? And you're muted, by the way.
Terrific. Really, really smart move by Peyton Falzone, I think, because you look at his abilities, you look at his upside, and it's still there from when we were talking about it before. But he left Penn State's class because Penn State wanted to be a tight end. Penn State was pretty, I don't want to say clear, because I don't think they came right out and were like, this is definitely going to happen. But he came to camp a bunch, worked with Danny O'Brien, worked with the offensive staff a bunch, and they were not sold on him being a quarterback. He's got one of the strongest arms I've ever seen. Doesn't always know where it's going. But if you look at his tape, he is I believe I called him a moose in pads when he committed the first time, because he is 6'4". He can really run, a really athletic kid. Why this is so smart here, and I think that he flipped to Auburn, and the new coach came into Auburn. I don't think they saw him as a quarterback either, and very, very, very well could end up at another position. I think that tight end is great for him. He's got 11-inch hands. He's got a great frame. He's got really good athleticism. We've seen that work before. But if you look at college football right now, there is a dearth of quarterbacks that can stick around and can do things for your football team. You think about what Penn State tried to do with Jackson Smolik at Iowa. Just run. There's a fit for that, because this guy is so athletic, because he does have an arm to go along with everything else that he brings to the table. There's an opportunity to be an effective college player. Now, again, I still think his best upside is at tight end, but at the same time, you're going into a year, two, whatever, where you don't know what that quarterback room is going to be like. There's going to be attrition. There's going to be guys moving out after during the portal system and everything like that. Of course, we've talked about the Beckham Kritza stuff a lot. So there's going to be opportunity there, more opportunity at Penn State than when he committed the first time, more opportunity than there would be in pretty much any given year. So that's a smart move by him to get in there, to be an in-state kid, to give yourself a win on National Signing Day, and he's a heck of a player. Like he broke his collarbone this year, I believe it was. So he missed a bunch of the season, but he's a heck of a football player. And it gives you that, I don't want to say college floor elevation, but because of what he can do with his feet, guys like that can be successful. Not saying it's going to happen, but you do have the opportunity to be successful. They brought him in as a second quarterback originally in the class. I still feel that's kind of what they're looking at right now. It's like, hey, if this hits, it can hit big. Not a guarantee to hit, but if this hits, it could hit big. So really, really smart move
at this point. Yeah, at this point, why not? It's not like you're going to chase away any other of the quarterbacks that you had, because Troy Hune is in Virginia Tech. The thing that, if you're watching here on the YouTube channel, if you're listening on the podcast, like the highlights haven't changed. This is the thing I'm concerned about, because what Fitz is saying is absolutely correct. This summer, and I took a lot of flack for this, of like wanting to give him the opportunity to get better when he got coaching from Brad Mandler in all the way out in Ohio, and the dedication to getting better. We are now in an era where quarterbacks can throw the ball and they can change their throwing motion. That is something that can happen. But what I see on film is you've got maybe 2 or 3 of these reads that are in progression, where he's actually reading the defense and then throwing. For the most part, what's happening is he's just kind of scrambling, chucking it deep, making plays with his feet. And then you've got, then you've got the throwing motion part of it that I don't think is settled. Like, give him, I wanted to give him the opportunity of being somebody who could change his throwing motion, but not everybody can do it. And so what he represents, I think, is less of an enigma now after his senior season, but still, the upside there as an athlete for sure is part of the conversation. So just, kind of some context to the quarterback part of it, of it's not just the throwing motion, it's the mental side of it. And I don't know that the situation may not have been good for him anyway, because he constantly is under pressure, but I haven't necessarily seen from these highlights, if those are the highlights he chose to put out there. And I'm like, come on, Peyton, put one throw where you're reading the defense.
He only played a couple games.
He played 3 games. Okay.
He broke his collarbone in the 4th game. I don't think we can accurately kind of say
that's fair.
We saw this progression or anything. He broke his collarbone. I think it was game 4, early, and
that's good to know. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's good to know, because you're going off, again, I've been following the football team this season. I haven't been able to watch or follow any of this stuff. So thank you for the context. Absolutely important in that as well.
Yeah, you need players, right? There's no way getting around it. And if you look at scrambling at different times, I think this is very different than them. And I don't know why I'm taking a shot here, but taking Brennan Thrift on signing day. They've taken players on signing day before that just weren't, cut out for this level. At his top peak, that's an oxymoron. At his peak, he can be a really effective college player. Now, he's a long way from that, and it's going to be away from there. T. Frank, we were at Elite 11, and is very different than the rest of the quarterbacks there. But when you talk about effectiveness at the college level, and the ability to run and the ability to be athletic and move an offense through a quarterback, it's not a bad, and I hate using this word, but not a bad fallback option for Penn State.
High floor option, right? Yeah. We don't know what the next coach is going to value as far as the scheme or the system.
I don't know that it's high floor, but it's more of this guy at worst case scenario can run the football and run.
That's what I mean.
Option offense. Yeah. High floor kind of brings talent into it and kind of brings development into it.
High baseline, there's a strong baseline of what you're going to get out of Peyton Falzone, because I think that there's no question he could operate an option offense successfully as a runner. I don't have a question.
Yeah, it's the Bo is a better fit for the Kotelnicki offense, than Drew. That's the conversation that we're trying to have right here. And I think that if you look around college football, there are some great quarterbacks who are great passers and things like that. But if you take a little bit of step down, the guys that are most effective are the guys that can run. So I'm not convinced it's going to work out, but I think it's a great move by both sides to get this one back, just to see what happens, really.
Hey, James wanted him still down the stretch. There's something there. And as an athlete, I think you just get him in the door and figure it out.
So I think we've talked around this, and I apologize because I'm not necessarily great at the pinball of this, but I did want to ask you this. The idea of not having a 2026 class, and Fitz, you did kind of say this about you can backfill with with the portal or over time. But just to refresh our memories, if Penn State were to tomorrow sign a coach who is currently a college coach, would there still be the opportunity to add to the early signing period class from another organization? And if not now, in the timeline of January hits and you're off and running for 2026 to build your next football program with the new identity of Penn State football, is that still in play even today on Thursday as we're recording this?
Honestly, I caught half of that question. Nate's trying to manipulate Kyle Shiatz by giving updates on our board. So I was reading what his text was going to be.
T. Frank, Julian Sayin enrolled at Alabama, participated in bowl practices, and was transferring to Ohio State 3 weeks later. So yeah, it is possible for guys to do that.
That one came with a coaching change. The more apt comparison is the Cal quarterback that went to Oregon, and it was like, this ain't it. Then I'm gonna go. So
But
yeah, I think that's
anyone that would be coming with a coach would be coming with a coaching change though too, is kind of my point there.
Right.
With that. So yeah, it is possible. And look, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's no true letter of intent and all that kind of stuff now. Like guys could still, I think this early signing period doesn't mean much anymore. I don't even know why it's where it is. It should be August, but it'll get there eventually, I think. But it really doesn't mean a whole lot. Like guys can still get out of these if especially with a coaching change. Like the NCAA is not trying to fight much right now. They are sick of court battles. If a guy signs with whatever school it is and that coach goes elsewhere, I find it very hard to believe that they're not going to allow, a handful of recruits to follow. So yes, it is possible. Obviously, then you have January. There are still going to be some 2026 guys who don't sign. Yeah, I could see this class being a little bit closer to 8, 9 or so, by the time it's all said and done, but it's not going to be anything big. This portal is going to be nuts, outgoing and incoming.
So this whole show has been the coaching search update, but just for my brain's sake of trying to like re-rack the cue ball here, let's talk about the Penn State coaching search. You can subscribe right now to the Blue White.
You're missing an R. You're missing an R.
Yeah, it's intentional because the whole thing exploded. That was intentional.
Sorry.
And for once, my spelling errors in Adobe Photoshop and Premiere, where there is no spell check, were intentional. Anyway, what we were saying here is go to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, subscribe for just $1. You can get access to the hot board as Fitz was talking about. Nate is up there giving updated information about what we have right now, so you can subscribe, go get that information. But I do want to talk about the coaching search a little bit in terms of like, the developments, we are now into what I would consider actually horse race season, where the whole time we were talking about this in October, November, I don't necessarily think the day-to-day names that came up were the point of what was going on behind the scenes based on what Nate was actually reporting. But now, after the guy they identified earlier this week decided to stay at BYU and Kalani Sitake makes that reversal, now it kind of feels like this is scrambling. Fitz, would you describe this as panic mode, scrambling? How would you describe this? Is that fair? Because that's how it's being characterized.
Yeah, I think scrambling is fine. Like, I think there's things that fell through. Obviously, Pat felt good about Sitake, and that did not work. And you can absolutely question that decision, because this is a guy. It's been really interesting to look at the number of coaches that are coaching at their alma mater that Penn State has targeted, talked to, whatever it may be, and that's probably the biggest connection of all. Like, I know we talked about fit and everything like that. If you did come to Penn State, and if you did have to do change recruiting, whatever, it's not where it's water under the bridge right now, or over the bridge maybe. But you're talking about a very, very big, like a bigger change. You bring religion into it. It's a bigger than everything, right? Now you're trying to figure out how to pivot, where to come from, how to save face. If you're Pat Kraft, it looks bad for him. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And the saving grace, if you're Pat Kraft, is it takes one guy, and it takes one guy to win. You're like, that is what you're looking at now. Is there a ton of confidence that's going to happen? I don't feel it right now. You talk about boosters that are, or donors, that are, mobilizing and trying to push their influence. And Neely's been involved, but she's gotten more involved. And there's a lot that goes into how
and all these things becoming more public as well, that it's not really like it's starting to come out and burst out the seams that these things are happening behind closed doors. And that part feels the most undercutting, Fitz, is that like all that stuff is now starting to leak out.
Yeah. Where's it leaking out? BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Check it out. It's very interesting to see the Kalshi odds move after Nate posts updates. I'll say that. And the number of people on Twitter that have inside sources that start talking after Nate posts are crazy, man. But going back to what we're talking about in the giant coaching search, I think the way maybe Pat Kraft would see it is to pivot and find a big name. And obviously that's not always the best course of action, but Daboll's name came out very shortly after that. Like him or not, and trust me, a lot of people do not. That's a big name. So how do you do that? Matt Campbell was the name buzzing this morning. You've got guys who I would say maybe were obvious candidates like Campbell that weren't involved for the longest time. That makes sense. You guys keep pushing Heartline. I'm going to shut the chat off. But it's it's really interesting to see that. Now, I think what you were asking me at one point when I wasn't listening, apologies for that, the NFL thing. I still think that if you're going to take a guy from the NFL, you have to be cautious because that guy's probably going to want to get back to the NFL because college coaching is a harder grind than NFL coaching. Now, the standards in the NFL, absolutely very high. Depends where you go in college. The standards will fluctuate. But the time that you're able to spend with your families, the time that we talked about with recruiting earlier, all that stuff is very, very much slanted to the NFL. So if you bring in a guy that's a coordinator in the NFL who might be on the periphery of getting an NFL head job, that is something you have to think about if you're Penn State, because you want stability. You just had 12 years of it. And for all the arguments that's going to go on about whether it was a great 12 years or not, you had stability, you had more stability, and you see the stability playing out when Penn State signs 2 guys and a lot of their old class goes to Virginia Tech. So there's going to have to be a rebranding of the coach and program sort of meshing and how this is going to work out. So that to me is really interesting. So when Pat Kraft turns around and goes and starts interviewing NFL guys, it reminds me of Bill O'Brien. Really, it reminds me of, that search was not great. But the issue with that and sort of the heart of the matter here is Penn State is in a completely different stratosphere than it was when it hired Bill O'Brien. Like the program prestige level and all that kind of stuff is very, very much different. And you're sort of like every day that this goes on, you're dragging that down a little bit lower, which is the big criticism there.
Yeah. And I guess, Ryan, go ahead.
I really don't have much to add, honestly, T. Frank. I totally agree with what Sean's saying there. One thing I would say is just when you look at the recruiting fallout and you look at, you got players pushing for Terry and all this kind of stuff. Like, how attractive is this to coaches at the moment? Mm-hmm. It looks bad. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a decent position, unless you're a coach who's out of it right now, and you are, unless you're in that situation, which I don't think Pat really wants to do, when you look at this situation and the outgoings that I think are going to come roster wise, and thinking about the incomings you're going to have to bring in, it's hard. It's going to take a lot of work, and you're already behind the 8 ball on it. So that's where, in my opinion, the fear is at right now, because every day this goes on, you're giving James a longer runway to keep chipping away at the current roster. Not saying James is going to get a ton of guys. I don't even know how that's going to play out, but there's still a lot of talent on this roster that'll be coveted.
Let me ask you this. This is because I had this question a couple of weeks ago, and I was just thinking about this out loud, because to me, like, the value of a program, because, like, not that I'm a coach, but I like the X's and O's. I think about the game from that perspective of what can I do with this team is about the players. But if you're in this situation and the recruiting class is not guaranteed, and there's this big question about the players that are going to be on the roster, what is the value of Penn State? What is the attractiveness of this organization? Because we talk about what James Franklin built over 12 years from where it started. Obviously coming out of the sanctions, it was about the facilities and everything that he's been able to, like, institute there. But on top of that, it has been the progression of, on this show, we've talked about 5-star offensive tackles picking Penn State, which is something that has not happened in the history of the program consistently. And there's like 3 of them on the roster. The defensive line, we've talked about Chaz Coleman. The talent on the roster feels temporary. And so I guess I'm asking you guys, what is the value to a coach of Penn State given where it is right now in this very moment? Because you could say, like, maybe 3 months ago, the value is different than it is now. So I guess, Ryan, what is it? That's not a greght anser. That's
listen,
not.
You're talking to the person. You're talking to the person who's been pre-writing. No. I've been pre-writing transfer portal stories for 5, 6, 7, 8 days now. I think it's going to be a massive outgoing, unless it's Terry Smith. Period. And that's why obviously they have good facilities. There's good money. It's a great fan base. I understand all those things. Stadium renovation is going to be great. Like, there are a lot of things to sell. Yeah, in 2-3 years, but the work that I think it's going to take for someone to get there is going to be a lot. And now that you've missed out on all these top prospects, the whole world's talking about ineptitude of a coaching search, and now you're worried about the athletic department and where that's going to maybe potentially be here. There aren't a lot of positives right now if you're a quality coach to take that take that jump at the moment, in my opinion. I think we're going to see, like I said, a ton of outgoings. And the one thing I'll add, we were talking about this on the board the other day, like one thing James did pretty well, I felt like, one, he had an incredible strength staff, right? That we saw that play out in the draft so many times. You know, coaches, we're talking about taking players away. Like coaches are going to like that, you know, that knowing that these guys have been a great strength staff, all those kind of things. Look at all the NFL players who, you know, are pretty well how they handle themselves in NFL locker rooms, right? Like it's a good locker room as far as quality players who don't really cause a lot of issues, all those kind of things. Like I think that this roster, if you're other teams, like there's a lot of talent, good players who are in a good strength program, all these kind of things that make them all very coveted. Like there has, how many teams of Penn State's roster, again, I know it wasn't a great year, but there's still a quality roster, quality talent, all those things. Like how many teams have been in this situation before? And especially in the portal era where every year money's getting bigger, bigger, bigger. I just think a lot of these guys are going to get stupid money thrown at them, money that they probably weren't getting here. And that's where this could really snowball. It's kind of Penn State's own fault for doing things the right way for a long time, putting all these things in place where you have quality kids and good strength conditioning, all those kind of things. But I worry that coaches know that and they see that, and that's why this could really snowball, truthfully.
Fitz, I guess the same question to you about the, you know, what's the value of Penn State as a program that you can sell right now, given what Ryan just said?
I mean, all this stuff still exists, right? Like, I think the further this goes on and the more that gets out there, you're going to have questions about working for Pat Kraft as your boss and not going to say, you know, what Todd McShay said about Jimmy Sexton, but like you look at James Franklin, and of course he's going to be bitter. Of course he's going to tell people he's bitter. Of course he's going to tell, you know, his agent's going to tell people he's bitter. Now, going back to the conversation we had on Tuesday, he's not going to completely, Sexton's not going to completely tank things because he likes money.
Right.
I think the fundamental flaw here is looking at the goal to bring in a sitting Power 4 coach and looking at this guy potentially bringing his roster, bringing his recruits, all that kind of stuff. Going back to the 2024 cycle. So Kalen DeBoer replaced Nick Saban at Alabama, right? So you've got different chain reactions here. So DeBoer goes to Alabama. Jed Fish goes from Arizona to Washington. You've got Mike Elko going from Duke to A&M. Those are the only 3 Power 4 coaches to move in that cycle. This year, it's just Lane. Everybody else is hiring up, which is great. I mean, I think that's how kind of this works. But if you're going to set yourself up to hire a Power 4 guy, you have to realize those guys aren't moving right now. Like you look at the extensions, it's always easier to stay right here. It's always easier to stay where you're at and keep what you've got going, unless you're talking about, for example, hiring from Vanderbilt in 2014. Like that it's got to be from the bottom of Power 4 to the top. Yeah.
That seemed where Pat Kraft wanted to aim higher.
Right.
And wanted to pick off a coach that would be more in line with the one he had.
And here's the thing, like the big swings that we've talked about, the Kalen DeBoers, Marcus Freeman was in there. Mike Elko, I think probably labeled as the number 1 guy. Like, you go after those guys. Absolutely. Like that's got to be part of the strategy. You have to go as big as possible, but when those things fall through, inevitably as they will, you got to pivot and get the right guy. And I will say Sataki would have been the right guy. This is what I say about one guy, like the one guy changing everything. Like if he makes that hire and it goes through and Sataki signs, it's good. He got his guy that was by the way, he was on the board for much longer than our hot boards would have said, or any public speculation would have said. But if he gets that guy, it's moot at this point. You can talk about fit, you can talk about all that stuff, but he got a guy that was high on the board. Now you're looking at, obviously, not to bring that back into play, but obviously guys that were tumbled a little bit.
Yeah. So that brings up this part of the conversation. I wrote about this yesterday. If you haven't seen this, it was picked up by our national team. So this number here is the estimated earnings for coaches associated with the Penn State search. So guys who re-signed, as Fitz just laid out, that it's easier to stay where you are. $370 million in contract extensions over the course of October 16th, when Kirk Nittany signed his deal, to, I believe, yesterday when Brent Key stayed at Georgia Tech. And so it's hard not to then ask this question of competence when it comes to the coaching search and to Pat Kraft. And so I guess, like, did Penn State get played here? Were these guys viable candidates? Was this a well-run search? Like, if that's where we are at the end.
There are so many parallels to recruiting here, like in terms of being able to get it across the line, get your guy, and how much, because like I said, it's easier to take the field, whatever. And this situation, everybody's going to be on a case-by-case basis, just like with recruiting. When a kid doesn't pick Penn State, some people will say you didn't want them and all that kind of stuff, but this staff has been pretty realistic, I think, or that last staff was pretty realistic in terms of guys they lost and guys they maybe should have gotten. I think that you're looking at this coaching search saying, okay, well, you're targeting these big level guys and you're getting them up to the line, but getting them over the line is a different story. And that's where the failure lies, right? That's where you're looking at this as a failure because you haven't gotten a coach in 53 days. And like I said, a lot of parallels in recruiting, a lot of people saying, well, he wasn't coming here anyway, but not privy to those conversations that we see, just like recruiting. Right. So like, I think that's where the failure goes. So when you lose a recruit, you drag them. When you lose a coach this publicly, you're going to get dragged. That's what happens.
Yeah. I mean, the perception of that is the perception here is incompetence, and that Penn State was used by the larger market to leverage other people to get paydays. And this, by the way, the number that I put out there does not include Jeff Brom, who signed yesterday, but the numbers are not final because I believe, based on what I was reading, that they're just in the beginning stages of that.
Can I dip in here real quick? That's been worked on for weeks. Like, Penn State was lukewarm on Brom. Like, I know people like wanted to push him as a candidate, but they were pretty lukewarm on him, and then sort of got into it and talked to him a little bit more. But like, that extension, I think, has been not in place, but being talked about for the last month. So there's that element to it that when it gets released, it's not always the case of when it's actually happening. Now there are some situations that Brent Key's, I mean, we started talking about a Brent Key extension a couple of weeks before it happened. We started talking about Clark Lee extension a couple of weeks before it happened. These things take time. So it makes sense from that standpoint, but yeah, I mean, I think there's a real, blind spot here, especially for guys at their alma mater or guys who have been comfortable and been good at jobs that have been good to them after basically those jobs took a chance on that guy, like Lee, like Key, like somebody else that doesn't rhyme with that. I don't know. So it's been fascinating to watch.
Okay. Ryan, any other thoughts here on recruiting National Signing Day, on the coaching search? I feel like there's some stuff that we left on the table here, but I can't for the life of me remember because I was thoroughly entertained by the program building aspect of that. But I'm a nerd and I love program building aspects of football teams. Anything you got here as we get out of here on the show?
I would just say 2026 is, they might get a couple guys late, but it's put it off to the side. I think the thing now is, yes, December's a dead period, but remember, Pennsylvania has one of the best 2027 classes we've seen in a while, just rankings wise and all that. Like, how much does all of this bad PR hurt them with that? Because, we talk about the head coach bump and all those kind of things that you kind of often see with recruiting. Now I'm very curious to see, because of how this is all played out over 50 some days. Now we're seeing, a lot of riffraff, I guess. I don't know what the best way to put it is, but there's a lot of people who want Terry, right? And Pat doesn't seem to want that. There seems a lot of fighting, and I think a lot of parents are seeing this. I'll be honest. I talked to a 2027 parent about it the other day. I'm not going to name who, but he's got a prominent son, and they're like, listen, we grew up Penn State, we love Penn State, all those kind of things, but whether it's right or wrong, and whether people are speculating or not, like, a lot of the information out there has been so negative that it's kind of scared some people. And I just, not saying that whoever they hire can't come back and get some of these prominent guys, but a lot of these people's thoughts of Penn State have really dropped, and they're kind of starting. Obviously, they're always starting all over again, but for the families who grew up Penn State or whatever it may be, that's even dropping a little bit further. And that's a fear that I have at the moment, as far as how that would impact Penn State going forward. The last thing I'd say is, if you're Pat Kraft right now, how important is it to get a head coach in the next 72 hours over taking 2 weeks and resetting this thing, because it kind of
Right.
feels like they're resetting it. I don't know exactly. Maybe they're not. We're going to find out. Because, for the portal, like I feel like for the portal, you got like 10 days. I feel like you really want to get a staff in here who can hit the ground running, do their scouting, all that kind of stuff.
How that after the first round of the playoff, because this has been my drop dead date, Ryan. My drop dead date has been after the first round of the playoff. If any of those coaches, you circle back after they lose, and there's an opportunity.
Coaches, dude. That's not happening. That's not happening. At this point. I don't think so. I think they tried. And they didn't get them. Am I wrong, Sean? Did you see any coach in the playoff coming to Penn State at this point?
I mean, like I said, they'll be happy to take Kalen DeBoer if Alabama's done with him, but
they're not.
What are we talking about here? And
right,
the thing about you saying resetting for another 10 days, it was just 2 days ago that we did the Sataki show.
Yeah,
that feels like a week and a half. This time moves so slow, and this time is like just grinding and grinding and grinding, and that's like 10 days 10 days would feel like a month. And
it would
maybe it already has, but it's been pretty crazy to think about how not slowly this process goes, but how slowly time passes when you're inevitably not having fun.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a great.
There's a lot of ways to look at it.
We got super chats we got to talk about too. So yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. This is going to be a very different conversation if we get to this year. It's like
Brian
hire
Daboll's
Terry
not coming
Smith
to college to be an offensive coordinator.
Exactly,
and so
like
get that in the NFL. Not happening.
I don't know that this was a conversation point for the show here, but I guess the question is like, what is better about Brian Daboll than Terry Smith? Like that's to me like in the conversation here. How is Brian Daboll brings more red flags while still having the same weaknesses as Terry Smith as a head coach, where I get he's been a leader at an NFL organization and the organizational stuff, like, okay, you can say that, but as we just outlined, like he's going to be leaning on his recruiting staff, how many of them are going to be here? Like we don't know how many of those guys are going to stay. We don't know how much of the current staff is going to stay. If he could convince those people to stay, where Terry, you have a higher chance of all of those things, and you still have the same downsides of, does he have the organizational discipline? And he talked about this himself. You have to be very organized. You have to have your finger on all of the buttons at the same time. You can't let any of these things slide. And that is just a lot. And maybe not every personality is ready for that. I'm not saying he is or isn't, but Brian Daboll has been a head coach and fired from the NFL. That's like what you have as far as the advantage over a Terry Smith, which it just feels like, and I guess Fitz, like, this will be the last question I have of, is there a world where Terry Smith is the head coach? Because that's what everyone seems to think. And to me, like at this point, would be the best candidate at this point. He seems to me as to solve a lot of these problems would be a stabilizing force. But I just don't see that being a thing that happens.
I mean, I don't see it happening, but I think I'm in line with that line of thinking. Like Terry Smith could stabilize a lot of things, and right now you've got a ton of instability in this search and a ton of and a lack of confidence in the people running it. And I think that would go a long way right now in December and maybe January. Where it goes from there, that would be where I would have questions. And I think Terry could recruit here. I think Terry is very everything that you would want about that. But at the same time, there's a big part of me that says Pat Kraft did not fire James Franklin to hire one of his assistants, former assistants, whatever. So that you've got that going. And that's kind of where I go back to it only takes one guy. So if he pivots, turns around and hires Matt Campbell, I guess it'd be looked at as a win, comparatively speaking to what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a guy that's on an original hot board. That's a guy that's got a lot of people stumping for him because he's a good football coach. But maybe not the sexiest guy out there. And sorry, I didn't mean to go that personal, but he's probably not the guy that moves the needle from like a giant grand slam. Everything that Pat Kraft said in his opening press conference after he fired James Franklin, are all those boxes checked? No, but I don't know that you're checking all those boxes with anybody right now.
Yeah, that train has sailed. When you missed on Kalani Sitake after missing on some of the other guys, that has been that's not going to happen unless, again, a miracle. You're counting your ifs, and we talk about going into a game. If you're counting how many ifs in the game plan, most likely you're not going to be getting where you want to go in that situation.
And I know it's not the popular opinion here, but the players aren't the ones to listen to right now, and I think they have more sway than they would have 12 years ago when they wanted to keep Larry, but
Yep.
I don't think that that's the way that you want to go. Now your donors are getting behind Terry, as reported yesterday by Pete Nakos. Yes, that's absolutely true. But there's still a lot of unchecked boxes all over the place. And like, we're talking about a win for the situation. And I think Matt Campbell would be a win for the situation. Would he be, if you came out and you hired him on October 20th, would that have been giant fanfare and all that kind of stuff? I don't know. Probably not. But at the same time, we're in a different spot here.
Yeah, it feels like when we talk about this, there's two things that have to happen. And this is going to be my final thought. This is not a short-term solution. Making this stop, making the bleeding stop of Penn State's public perception is absolutely a PR crisis right now that Pat Kraft has on his hands. And that short-term thing has to be stabilized. And by hiring a coach, that is a stabilizing factor. But that's a long-term decision. You can't hire a guy with the idea that we're going to fix this for 2 years or for whatever. So for that factor, you have to make a long-term decision while the building is perceived to be on fire. And some of the things that we're like hearing and some of the things Pete Nakos is reporting is that, like, yes, there are absolutely problems right now internally for Penn State football, and it's going to make making a good decision for the program long-term even harder, because what we've talked about here, other than money, is politics for an hour. The politics of the coaching world, the politics of agents, and now the internal politics of Penn State. And Pat Kraft has to navigate all of those things, and his job is to find the best possible candidate in this situation for Penn State to hire him to a 4 or 6 year contract. You're not going to be hiring him for like a 2-year tryout period, because at that point, these guys will tell you, how are you going to recruit with that? So we're going to see if he can do that in the midst of all of these things going on. And of course, we will be here to talk about it as it goes. This is the BWI YouTube channel. Should have mentioned this. Please subscribe here to the YouTube channel. If you're listening on podcast version, please do that as well.
We did have another question about sabermetrics in college football. Do they have those yet? Everyone's got their own evaluations. I don't think they have like advanced.
We're talking about just advanced stat?
Yeah, like money. Well, I mean, like
that's what PFF is. So like internally, each program has their own advanced data, and PFF provides advanced data as well. It's not just the stats you see on YouTube or on their YouTube show or their front-facing thing. Almost every single college football program has those data level things from football. So that's absolutely part of it. It's just whether or not you use it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting question, because you look at how much that's moved. And obviously most of my research here comes from the movie Moneyball. It was a book. I didn't get that far into it, but you look at the breaking down the in-between stuff. And I think it's so much harder in football because of the issues that we see with PFF are scheme-based. You don't know where he's supposed to be blocking. You don't know what coverage he's supposed to be reading, throwing to, all that kind of stuff. So it makes it a lot harder. So all that stuff comes down to the evaluations that they've been doing or the evaluations that they do during the season. There's a lot of analysts. There's a lot of recruiting staff and things like that comb rosters looking for potential guys to go and evaluate whole rosters if they think that, a job is going to open up and all of a sudden these guys are going to go elsewhere. Now, I think with the rule changes where it closed the portal after the coaching changes, that kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off. But at the same time, you can bet that 100 coaching staffs in the country have already combed Penn State's roster, probably more than 100, there's 134, right? Have already combed Penn State's roster and have pecking orders designed based on the film review, based on what they've seen from that, based on what they've heard from agents, coaches, high school coaches, and things like that. So I think that's an interesting point where Penn State is more of the hunted right now, especially since you don't really have a staff. You have a bunch of guys that are still in that building that worked for James Franklin, and they're continuing to the end of their obligations, if you will. But I don't think they're recruiting. I don't think they're, mobilizing for what Penn State's going to look like in February.
All right. Well, we're going to get out of here. We've done an awesome job of discussing, I think, every single aspect of this that we can on a 1-hour show, and we'll be giving you more of it over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, because obviously, we got more to say. There's more conversation about this. We'll be back on Tuesday, and again, if news breaks over the next 3 days. You can always count on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel to be covering that for you. Here we'll have breaking news. So if you're listening on the podcast version, please give us a 5-star review, like the podcast, all those great things so that we can help spread the news and everyone watching this here. And, of course, here on the YouTube channel, like this, there's hundreds and thousands of people that watch this. So please, if you like the video, it goes a long way to helping us here on the channel, giving you this conversation for free for an hour. So we'll talk to you later.